to our guests and welcome to Glenwood High School. We're truly honored to have Congressman Aaron Schock here to speak with us today. We want to thank him for offering his time to visit GHS. We're also thankful to all of you for coming here to listen to what he has to say. A couple of weeks ago, Congressman Schock's office contacted Paul Chatham and offered to have the congressman come and speak to our district and our students. Recognizing that such offers are genuinely enriching experiences for our students, giving them a chance to hear from one of the real-life movers and shakers in Washington, D.C. The district office and administration of GHS agreed to take advantage of this opportunity. With a great deal of coordination between Congressman Schock's office and the school district, we've been able to make this all possible today. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to thank Mr. Becker, Mrs. Schroeder, Mr. Duggins, the congressman, and his office for helping us hammer out all the details for today's efforts. Thank you. Couldn't pull this off without you. Let me begin by providing you a brief bio of our guest. Aaron Schock was born in Morris, Minnesota. He moved with his family to Peoria when he was in the 4th grade. Congressman Schock graduated from Peoria Richwood High School in 2000, and because he was able to earn many dual credit courses in high school, he ended up completing his bachelor's degree in finance at Bradley in just 2 years. Congressman Schock served on the Peoria School Board from 2001 to 2005. Before earning a seat as a representative of the 92nd District in Illinois, where he served until 2009. Since then, he has served as representative in Illinois' 18th District in the U.S. House of Representatives, a position which he currently occupies and for which he is running for re-election this fall. Congressman Schock is the youngest member of Congress and the first member of Congress to be born in the 1980s. That was a very concise biography of our guest, but the best way we know to get to know somebody is to hear what they have to say. So without further ado, I ask you to welcome our guest, Congressman Aaron Schock.
Good morning. Okay. Thank you for letting me come to your school this morning. I know that you all were probably very disappointed that I was taking you away from your otherwise previously scheduled classes, right? So once again, thank you to Principal Lee and your superintendent and administrators here for making this all happen. I thought the most effective way for us to have a conversation this morning is for me to just give you a little bit of a deeper background on where I'm at and how I got into Congress, why I'm in public service, and then really to open it up for questions. I know there's, I think, 6 of you who've been previously selected to ask a question, and then if we have time, maybe we can take some questions from the audience if some of you have questions as well. As was mentioned, I grew up in rural Minnesota until I was 10 years old and moved to Peoria with my parents. I was the youngest of 4 kids. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I have 3 older siblings that are quite a bit older than me. I was kind of the oops child. My parents had 3 kids, and then 6 years later found out they were having a 4th one. And so I have a big family in and around Peoria. I have 13 nieces and nephews, and they're all great at walking in parades and stuffing envelopes when I need volunteers for the campaign. But probably one of the biggest misperceptions people have about me because of my age is they think, oh, gee, he's young, he's in politics, his family must be full of politicians. His father must have been in office, and his grandfather must have been in office. Couldn't have been further from the truth. Nobody in my family has ever run for office before. And truth be told, when I ran for office, I actually had to register my older brother to vote. So one of the reasons, the reason really, that I got involved in politics was when I was sitting where you are, but as a junior, with all of my high school credits at the end of my junior year. And our school district did not do what your school district did, which is invest in probably AP classes and dual credit classes. We were having financial issues, and so they started cutting a lot of the dual credit and advanced placement classes. And so, like some of you probably, you took maybe some foreign languages in middle school, or maybe the algebra in middle school, so that you could start out with geometry and trigonometry and calculus. And so what happened for me is I got to the end of my junior year, and I'd run out of courses to take. And so my senior year, I was looking at not really having a lot of courses to be able to take, and I had all my high school credits. So I went to my school counselor and I said, hey, I want to go to the UI early. I'd been applied to and accepted to the University of Illinois to major in accounting, and so I wanted to go to UI. And the school counselor informed me that I could not graduate early because of the school board policy, which said you had to have at least your 4 years of PE. So I had taken all of my other classes, filled my English requirement, my math requirement, my sciences requirement, my foreign languages requirement, but I had not taken my 4th year of PE. Well, PE is a very important subject. Physical fitness is a very important issue. Talk more about that if you want. But I was not thinking that PE for me as a senior was the reason for me not going to college. And so I really went and met with the school board. I didn't know who the school board was, quite frankly. I'm sure all of you know who your school board is. You probably have those school board members on speed dial on your cell phone. I didn't. And like your school district, I went to a very large school district. I had 1,000 kids in my high school. I had 38 schools in our school district, 16,000 kids in our school system. And so I didn't know who my school board was. But they were the ones who made the policy that meant I couldn't graduate early. So I asked my school counselor, could you give me a list of the names? And so he gave me the list of the names, and I called each one of them and said, I'm Aaron Schock, I'm a junior at Richards High School. I got all my high school credits, except for PE, and I wanted to graduate early. And they said, well, that's nice, but we're not going to let you graduate because we get money from the state for every child that's in our school system. And if we let you out, we won't get the money. So you're going to have to stay. Well, being young and altruistic, I said, this is outrageous. You know, why should I be stuck here in high school for a senior year only taking PE? So my senior year, I only took PE at my high school. And so I went to my high school every morning, took an hour of PE and left. And it's a great way to start the day. But what I did is I took classes at my junior college, and I took 21 hours of college credit my freshman year, or my fall semester, my senior year in high school. And I took 22 hours of college credit the spring semester. And then I took what they call CLEP exams, college level examination program. And if you score high enough in certain areas, you get college credit. So when I got done with high school, I had 57 hours of college credit, and enough college credit to start as a junior in college my freshman year. So I went to go vote for the first time as a senior in high school, and I got to the bottom of the ballot, and the last position on the ballot was the school board. And no one was running against the incumbent school board members. And I thought this was pretty outrageous, because I knew all the school board members, and I felt like they were a bit out of touch with what was going on. And so, feeling very frustrated, I left the voting booth on election day, went home, and I called the school board secretary and I said, what does it take to be a school board member? I'm going to recruit somebody to run. And she comes back and she says, well, you got to have two things. You got to be a registered voter and you got to be 18 years old. I said, well, what else? She said, that's it. Well, shoot, I'm going to be 19. I'm overqualified. So I said, who's up for election? So she checks and she comes back and she said, well, it's our school board president. I said, perfect, send me the petitions. So they said, I need 200 signatures to get on the ballot. So, oh, again, I don't know anything about running for office. So I go door to door, and I get 250 signatures. And I go and I file them with the clerk of the school board. And a week later, my doorbell rings, and I go downstairs, and I open the door, and there's a sheriff's deputy on my doorstep. I'm thinking, uh-oh, what do I do? So he says, I'm here to see Aaron Schock. Are you Aaron Schock? I said, yeah. He goes, well, I've got a summons here for you to appear in court. I said, what in the world? The school board president had hired an attorney to challenge my petitions on the basis of ditto marks. Now, I'm telling you this in case you get to run for office someday. When you go door to door, you want people to write out their name, but also write out their address. What happened for me is when I went door to door, the husband would sign Bob Smith, 123 Main Street, City of Peoria, State of Illinois. And then oftentimes the spouse or someone else at the house would sign and then put ditto marks underneath the address. Well, in Illinois law at the time, if you challenge someone's petitions, it goes before an election judge, with one exception. If you challenge someone's petitions for school board, it goes before a committee of its peers. So 3 of our cohorts on the school board were the official judges, all of whom I had already met. all of whom already did not like me. And they decided that these were not good marks. They were just stray lines on a piece of paper, and that I should be thrown off the ballot as a technicality. So with 2 months till election day, I'm thrown off the ballot. The front page of the Peoria paper says, "Teen off ballot for board seat, the election's over." And I was feeling pretty humiliated because, after all, I was running to do the right thing. I was running because we needed somebody young, somebody who was in touch with what was going on in the school system, somebody who understood the trials and tribulations of being a student in the school system. And I also happened to be running against the youngest school board member, who was 52 at the time. Which is pretty young, 52. There were 2 more in their 50s, 2 in their 60s, and 1 in their 70s. And so I thought, this is ridiculous. Well, I was thrown off the ballot, and that week, because of all the media attention, I had about 30 angry moms call me. And they said, "We think this is outrageous what they did to you. We want to help you get on the school board. Tell us what we can do." So I said, "Great. Meet me at the library on Saturday." So I got 30 moms show up at the public library. I roll out a map of the city of Peoria, and I said, "Here's the deal. We got to cover each one of these streets in the next 2 months. Tell people who I am, why I should be on the school board, and then how to vote for me. Because I'm going to run still. I'm going to run as a writing candidate where they have to write my name on the ballot." So in 2 months, with the help of 30 moms, we knocked on 13,000 houses. And on election day, I got 6,406 people to physically write my name on the ballot accurately, and I beat the school board president by 60%. So that's how I got into politics. Now, the short story on my school board service is I got on the school board, still the youngest member. Like I said, I'm 19. I get sworn in next to a woman who was serving her 20th year on the school board, which means she was elected a month before I was born. So to say I added a little diversity is a bit of an understatement. 2 years after being on the board, they elected me vice president. A year later, they unanimously voted to make me president of the board. Served 4 years on the school board, get my degree in finance, and started a small business. And then I ended up running for the State House. I won't get into the specifics unless you start asking me about it. All I will tell you is there was a guy by the name of Rod Blagojevich, who became our governor. I did not agree with a lot of what Governor Blagojevich was doing, and my state rep was voting for much of what he wanted, and so I decided that she needed to be challenged, and this race ended up becoming the most expensive state house race in Illinois history. The Chicago folks came down to Central Illinois and spent just under $1 million, $980,000, all on attack ads against me. 40,000 voters, 40,000 votes cast, and I won by 235 votes. So, if you wonder, you can applaud. If you wonder whether or not what you do when you turn 18 matters, I'm living proof that it does. Because obviously when you win by 235 votes, there's 235 people here. So 235 people showing up on the right side of an issue on election day absolutely can make the difference. Served in the State House for 2 terms, was reelected by a much larger margin than 200 votes when I ran for re-election, and then served in the State House for 4 years, and then my congressman, Ray LaHood, who is now the Transportation Secretary in President Obama's cabinet, he announced he was retiring from Congress. The seat opened up, and I ultimately ran and was elected to Congress. While in Congress, I served on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the oldest committee in Congress. It's often thought to be the most powerful committee in Congress because it deals with 3 things. It deals with taxes, what your tax rates are going to be. It deals with entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security, which is the largest expenses in our budget. And it deals with trade, meaning who you can sell stuff to if you're in the United States. So those are the 3 major focuses of the Ways and Means Committee. I split my time between Illinois and DC. Probably the big misperception people have when they think of a congressman is they think of the Capitol. A lot of times people say to me, gee, how's Washington, how's DC? When I'm there, it's I'm there for 3 or 4 days. And then I fly right back to Central Illinois. Because I have 161 towns in my district. And in that district is a lot of diversity. I have some big towns like Springfield, and Decatur, and Peoria, and Bloomington, and I have many small towns. And obviously the needs of many of these small towns are much different than the larger towns. And so for me to basically do a good job representing my constituents, I gotta know who I'm representing. So a large part of my time is spent back here in Illinois doing constituent work, understanding what needs there are in the community. Maybe there's a bridge problem, maybe there's a water project that needs help, maybe there's an individual constituent who's got a problem with foreign adoption, they're trying to adopt a child from Ethiopia, or maybe they have a problem with their veterans assistance, they're returning Iraqi or Afghanistan vet, and they need help. Anything you can imagine in the federal government that could go wrong, and there's plenty. That's what my job as the representative is. I'm your representative at the federal level. The other part of my job is what we think of as a congressman, which is the work in the Capitol, voting on laws, representing you on the floor of the United States House, and hopefully standing up and speaking the view of at least a majority of my constituents on legislation. But that part of my job is really just half of the part. My contract is for 2 years, and every 2 years my bosses, which are probably some of you, perhaps if you're 18, can hire or fire me. And ultimately, the Congress, the House of Representatives, is the only elected position in America that you cannot be appointed to. If I quit, or I get run over by a truck, or something bad happens to me, there has to be a special election. Not so if there's a presidential, the president dies in office, the vice president becomes. If the United States senator dies, you can buy the seat. Oh, no, I'm sorry. If there's a U.S. Senate seat open, the governor makes the appointment. That's just for us in Illinois, right? So the U.S. House is unique in that respect, because the U.S. House, you actually have to run to get there, and you have to run every 2 years. And unlike the Senate, you all know how many United States senators we have, right? Because you all had to pass the Constitution test. We got observers in the back, so if you can't answer this question, you have to take the test over again. Who knows how many U.S. senators there are? Yes? 100. And how many does each state have? 2. So every state has 2. Now, you seem to know the answers pretty quick. Do you know who our 2 U.S. senators are? Do you know who one of our U.S. senators are? Okay, Dick Durbin. Do you know who the other U.S. senator is? Anyone? Who? Mark Kirk. Mark Kirk. So Mark Kirk and Dick Durbin are 2 U.S. senators. How many congressmen are there? Who just said that? 435. Good. What's your name? Greg? Okay, Greg. 435. I'll give you $100 if you can tell me how many congressmen there are in Illinois.
19.
21. There are 19 congressmen. Happy Greg. That's all right. This is important. There are 19 congressmen, but after this election, there will be 18. Because we're going to fire one. What happens is, you know why there's 435 congressmen? Does anybody know what the significance of that number is? Or perhaps why Illinois has 19 congressmen? You know why we have 19? In the black.
Is it electoral votes?
No. Why is that?
It's based on population.
Based on population. So the bigger your state, the more congressmen you get, right? So how do we know how big the state is?
Census.
Census, very good. How often do we do a census?
10 years.
10 years. Yeah, these guys are smart. I'm impressed. Every 10 years. So we just did a census, all right? And we take the total population in the entire country and divide by 435. So even though the country gets more and more people, we keep the same number of congressmen in the Congress. So there's 435. So if there's 300 million plus people, you divide that by 435, and then each state gets that many people, that many congressmen, based on how many people per congressman there have to be. Follow me? So 10 years ago, you used to have about 600,000 people for every congressman. So Illinois had about 12 million people. They had about 19 congressmen. They had 19 congressmen for 10 years. You know how many congressmen there are in the state of Montana? 1. In the entire state. The state of Montana, the state of North Dakota, the state of South Dakota, they have 2 United States senators in those states and only 1 congressman. There are actually more cows in the state of Montana than people. That's why they have a cow in Congress. All right. So what happens is now, because there's more people, instead of 600,000 people, you have to have 750,000 people for every congressman. So Illinois has not kept up with the rest of the country in terms of the rate of growth. We've lost population as a state relative to all the other states. That makes sense? So we go from having 19 congressmen to 18 congressmen. Even though we have a little bit more people than we did 10 years ago, we don't have as good a growth as the rest of the country. So that's why we go down to 18 congressmen. And then what happens is the legislatures in each state, your state house and state senate, get to draw a new map and new boundaries for the new districts. And so my district and every other congressman who's left get completely different districts. So my district that has about 600,000 people and it now grows to 750,000 people, which is now why I have much of say in the county in my new district. So now you're brushed up on all your constitutional representation. I'm assuming you all know who the president is. I'm sure you all enjoy watching the Jay Leno and the David Letterman's Man on the Street. You know, who's the vice president? Who's the Speaker of the House? Does anybody know who the Senate president is? The vice president, very good. How about the Senate leader? Senate leader, guy from Nevada, Harry Reid. So, okay, enough of the Q&A, or at least being thrilled about this. So with that, I thought I would open it up for any questions that you might have about what it's like running for office, any issues before Congress, perhaps political questions, legislative questions, anything you want to ask about. Do you want to take?
Yeah, what we decided we're going to do is the students turn in questions ahead of time to the teachers, and we have a dozen of those compiled. And what I've asked is for 6 students to come up here. They each have 2 questions, and they're going to just have a seat and walk in and see with them. And they're just going to go through those questions. And as you said earlier, if there's time after that, you want to answer some open questions, it's at your own risk. You can walk in and do that. So with those 6, I had come on up here. While we're waiting, Ms. Bell, Center Superintendent's offered $1,000 if anybody can name all 19 representatives before we leave.
Sure. Now, is this a reward or a punishment? Really? Okay. So now you got to tell me what you did wrong to get up here. All right. Craig,
What kind of relationship do you have with the media?
what kind of what?
Relationship do you have with the media?
Well, considering there's about a half dozen behind me in the room here, excellent relationship. My relationship with the media is this. They have a job to do, and I have a job to do, and both of our jobs require cooperation among the two of us. I have always found the media to be much easier to work with if you're upfront with them. If you say to them, look, I'm not going to answer that question. Or if you don't know the answer to a question, you just say, I don't know the answer to that, I'm going to get back to you. Rather than trying to be too cute. Trying to answer a question you don't know the answer to. Hiding from the media if it's a tough question you don't want to answer. Or perhaps it's a topic that you don't really want to talk about. If you try and dodge the media, or you try and ignore the media, or you try to not cooperate, typically the media goes from being an impartial mediator to your enemy. That's not a good thing. So I've generally had a good relationship with media. Now, look, media is like congressmen. Media are like school teachers. Media are like doctors. There's some bad ones. There are some in the media who have an overtly biased opinion, take an overtly biased position. And in the case of you running into people like that, my position has always been, at some point, you can choose no longer to have a relationship with that person simply because you cannot get your voice out through their medium. The reason why the media is important to my job is because if I'm going to represent a people, I've got to know who my people are, so I've got to be able to listen to them. The media is a form of that, whether it's the forum portion of the local newspaper where people write in, whether it's the local radio station where people call in and voice their opinions, or whether it's me communicating to my constituents. I can't do it in a forum like this to 700,000 people. I can't do it knocking on their door saying, hi, I'm Aaron Schock, this is what I stand for. You've got to be able to communicate to the people you're trying to represent using the media. So in that respect, it's just as important for me to be able to use their medium to communicate to people as it is for them to be able to get whatever topics covered they want or questions they need answered to help educate the electorate and population that I represent. But all in all, I think I've got a good relationship with my media here locally as well as the national folks I have to deal with in D.C.
In today's world, do you think it's possible to win an election on popularity and media alone?
Well, sometimes I get this question about popularity, and we assume that popularity means a level of superficiality or superficialness. Those are words. As if being popular is a bad thing. The last time I checked, probably the more popular man or woman should be elected, right? The notion that somehow we want to elect somebody who's not popular or elect somebody who's not respected or supported by the people, that typically only lasts in totalitarian regimes or under dictators. So the fact that people who are popular win elections in a democracy or elected republic, that's how it should work. Now, I think the question gets to, you want people with depth. You don't want somebody who's just superficial. You don't want somebody who's just full of sizzle. I think that it's up to the electorate, it's up to voters, it's up to you as the bosses to make sure that folks like myself who are running for office have depth and can speak specifically to issues that you think are important in an election. So the challenge is, when you run for office, the media likes to ask you 30-second sound bites. They like to say, where are you at on guns? Where are you at on immigration? Where are you at on whatever your issues that you can pick? And so you're only getting to hear 10 or 15 seconds on it, and oftentimes the response to those type of questions require much more than 15 or 20 seconds. And so the way that you ensure that the people who get elected aren't just sizzle, aren't just perhaps superficial, is to drill down and understand what is their position on these issues. And as a voter, make sure that you're voting for people that have depth on the issues. Ultimately, the voters get what they deserve. Ultimately, we as a state, we as a country, will elect people based on the majority. And if the majority of people view a certain way, that's what their elected officials will view. And if a certain majority of the voters don't do their homework and allow people who are perhaps not of the best standards to get in, then we have to live with the will of the majority. But I certainly can't change the will of the majority. The will of the majority has to change those of us who are elected officials who they may or may not agree with.
What do you think about Romney's quote about the 47%?
Well, two things. First, the fact that 47% of Americans pay no effective tax rate to the federal government is a true statement. I think it's an unfortunate statement. It is an all-time high in our country where no other period in our time has there been that large of a percentage of the population who don't pay any effective rate to the federal government. That in essence means there's 47% of America who are not paying for education, who are not paying for roads and bridges, who are not paying for the military, and who don't have skin in the game in terms of what it costs to run a country and the benefits of what living in the country means. The flip to that is, I think when Governor Romney said, I can't worry about those 47% because they're not going to vote for me, I would disagree. Because, as a candidate myself, I think you have to compete for every demographic of voter. If the voter is someone who you don't think is going to vote for them, if it's somebody who's perhaps unemployed, a young student who is in college right now studying to get a job, perhaps an immigrant worker who's here wanting a better way of life, I think certainly as a party, being in the Republican Party, I would say that any party, if you want to be a majority party, has to compete for every demographic of the vote. So I think the fact that he stated was correct, however, the assumption that he makes was not a wise one, and perhaps I think he realizes that at this point too.
What made you decide to become a congressman?
Well, I don't know if I've become a congressman, but I would say that I have the role now. And what made me decide to was two things. One, I have a passion for public service. I think these jobs are ones where you can make a decision, and it can affect not only the 700,000 people that have elected you, but in some cases it can have an impact on the 300 million people who live in the country. And in some cases, the votes we take affect international policy. So to me, there's no greater role, no greater job than public service, because it's not about you, it's really about society and what kind of legacy your country is leaving in the world as well as domestically, and you can have an impact on that. So that's a very exciting prospect, I think, or exciting role for someone to play. The other is timing. Some people say to me, gee, if you had advice for me, I want to be a congressman someday. What's my advice? Well, part of life is hard work. Part of life is how you apply yourself in the decisions you make, and part of life is about timing. And if I wanted to, when I was your age, to decide I wanted to be a congressman, I'm not sure that I could have told this person they had to retire and this person they couldn't run, and so on. So part of it is timing, but part of it is also a desire to serve and feel like I can make a difference in my community and in the country by doing so.
Do you think the U.S. should increase the defense budget?
Well, we are currently borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar we spend. So clearly we have to spend less money, right? It's not rocket science. You're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar. Not many people, or anyone really, can sustain that. You can't borrow 40 cents out of every dollar you spend in a week. Parents or the bank might get kind of mad at you. So we got to cut. And there are some people who say, well, we got to have less government, but don't cut defense. We got to have less government, but don't cut in Social Security and Medicare. You gotta have less government, but don't cut in education. Well, we're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar. So none of that we spend 40 cents on. So we spend about 15 cents of the dollar on the entire defense budget. So if we completely eliminated the Department of Defense, got rid of every tank, every bomb, every ship, every person who's in the military in every branch, we'd save 15 cents out of the dollar we spent, and we'd still have a huge deficit. We spend 15 cents of the dollar on discretionary spending, education spending, social service agencies, transportation is in that 15 cents. So we completely eliminate all that, and we still have a deficit. Or the other 65 cents out of the dollar, roughly, are our entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then a little bit for interest on the debt. So I think the responsible thing to do is you gotta cut in all of those areas, being careful not to completely decimate our education programs, completely decimate our defense programs, completely decimate our retirement programs like Social Security, Medicare. But to stand up and hold any of those cows as sacred cows, even in Montana, is not a smart thing. There should be no sacred cows, I don't believe, including in defense. And it's why I've supported budgets the last 2 years that have reduced the amount of spending within the Department of Defense. Now, some of the proposals that the President has made with the cuts in defense, the Defense Secretary has said could jeopardize our ability to keep America safe for this reason. Some of you may have read about this thing called the sequester, which is a result of the big debt limit debate that happened a year ago. The sequester requires about $1 trillion to be cut from defense over the next 10 years. Leon Panetta, the President's Defense Secretary, has said if we cut $1 trillion out of defense, that we will shift America's ability to have a two-front war to America's ability to only have a two-front war, a two-footprint war. If we cut $1 trillion, it means we'll only be able to have a one-footprint war, and in that case, Leon Panetta says you can't go to war, which means you can't defend yourself. Because what it means is, if you're responding to somebody who's attacked you, and the entire world knows that you can't respond to anyone else, then all you need is somebody to attack you, and now all of a sudden you're vulnerable. So I mention that because there is a point at which you can't cut defense, otherwise you might not have a defense if you can't defend yourself. So we have to be careful, but I don't think defense should be a sacred cow. I have voted for budgets that make cuts in defense. We just have to make sure that we're not jeopardizing our national security. But we also have to make cuts in all those other departments, which in many cases eat up a large percentage of the budget. Make sense? Okay. Question?
What advice do you have for students here at GHS?
Just in general? Well, let's see. How much time do I have for advice? You know what? My advice would be really simple. First of all, I think there's some universal qualities if you look at people who are successful in life, whether they're athletes or elected officials or business people. One, it's that they've challenged conventional wisdom. Somebody said, oh gee, you can't be 27 and elect to Congress. Well, that's because there wasn't anybody, and that's because people said it couldn't be done, so it hadn't been done. Some people say, Steve Jobs was crazy for Apple. A lot of people benefited as a result of his genius. Albert Einstein. You look at these people who have done great things in their life, and many times they've had successions of failure prior to their success. So the first thing I would say is don't allow conventional wisdom to define you. Don't think you've got to go to 4 years of high school, because that's what everybody accepts, even though you're in your 4th year of high school. But don't allow someone to assume, well, gee, because everybody's asking you where you're going to go to college next year, that the assumption is you got to go to college. Don't assume that once you're in college, because people assume you should do something, that you should. Be willing to challenge conventional wisdom and think outside the box. Second, when you decide you're going to do something, if it's a homework assignment or it's a chore, outperform expectations. If you outperform expectations every time you take on a task and every time that you set yourself on a goal, you will achieve far more than anyone else around you. Because people pay attention to successes and failures. So you can get people's attention by performing way below expectations, which is not a recommendation I would give you. Or you can get attention by performing far above expectations. You're not going to get a whole lot of attention by doing what's expected. And so to the degree that you can outperform what your teachers expect of you, outperform what your employer expects for you, outperform your peers, you're going to get attention, you're going to be looked to for leadership, you're going to be looked to for opportunity, you're going to be looked to for advancement. And I think that holds true no matter what field you're in, whether it's being the principal of a school, whether being an elected official, or whether being in business. So, and the final thing is, and you've probably heard this before, find something you're passionate about. I'm passionate about what I do. Many weeks I'm working 7 days a week. I don't care. I like it. I don't mind going to Boy Scout ceremonies on the weekend. I don't mind marching in parades on Saturday. I don't mind going to events on a Sunday evening because I like what I'm doing. And if you like what you're doing, then you're not going to worry about the time clock. You're not going to worry about your pay. And you're going to have a much more happy and fulfilling life. And the final piece of advice I would give to you is ask people who are older and lived a longer life than you what their advice would be. There is no need for you to make mistakes that you can learn from other people's life. And the one thing that I'm not bashful about doing is asking a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions from people I serve with in Congress, people that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. What would you do differently? If you were elected to Congress today, what would you do? Because you can learn an enormous amount. And what I find is a lot of people don't have the humility to ask their teachers their opinion, to ask their peers their opinion, to ask their parents their opinion. You don't have to take it. You think it was crazy advice, but more times than not, you're going to look at that advice and say, you know what, that's pretty sage. And you're going to learn not to make a mistake. You know it's advice. And they all have one more question?
Two more questions.
Two more.
Yeah, we're about basically out of time. We'll just go over to Craig and Kate. Craig?
All right, I feel kind of bad. It's kind of the same questions I asked you before.
Two of the same questions?
Hey, I don't think we expect it to be so thorough.
Oh.
But
Well, this might be a quick one.
yeah, do you feel like your relationship with the media has affected how you've developed as a public figure?
Well, I've had a good relationship with my media, on balance, I would say. As I've developed, I would say probably one of the unique opportunities I've had over the last decade is to really live in a fishbowl, because I think the media today is much different than the media perhaps 20 years ago. Today, as I'm answering these questions, I have to assume that somebody in here perhaps has their phone on and is recording this. I have to assume that tonight, if I go out to dinner with some friends, there's somebody there with a phone that could be taking pictures. I have to assume that anything I say today, perhaps if I have another job 10 years from now, could be used either for or against me. And I have to assume that for $50, any of you can become a media source vis-a-vis an online blog. So media oftentimes you think of as traditional media, meaning television, newspaper, and radio. But today, the way I develop as an elected official, as a human being, really is driven a lot by new media, social media, Facebook, Twitter, I can tweet something from inside this gymnasium, and based on the 20,000 followers I have, hit all the major news reporters really that matter out of BC. That couldn't have happened 5 years ago. So there's a certain amount of perhaps non-development that occurs because of the on all the time 24/7 that is required now of people to hold elected office because of the prevalence of all kinds of forms of media, even when you don't think there's media perhaps present.
Do you think that younger guy have an advantage on social media?
As a younger guy, I think I definitely have an advantage in terms of utilizing social media. I think I have a disadvantage in terms of, because I'm unique, because I'm young, there's more interest in covering me than perhaps somebody who was in their 50s. So I think I actually it cuts both ways. Yes.
Great, what's your favorite movie?
You know, these are the worst ones. People ask me what my favorite is or my favorite that is. My favorite movie. So I have a lot. So my preference on movies are action films. So I like James Bond. I like a lot of the Harrison Ford. I like the new Bourne Identity that's coming out. The Bourne movies. My favorite movie when I was like in junior high-ish was Commando. Have you seen that with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It's an old flick, so I mean this is showing my age because it was filmed in the 80s. But Commando's a pretty good film. I mean, you know, back in the day it was an action film, but now it's a little corny. But anyways, that was my favorite film. But Dumb and Dumber. That was one. I don't remember one.
He actually has 6 of those, just real quick with that.
Oh, okay. Ask away.
Fire away.
What's the last book you read?
The last book I'm reading, actually I'm almost done with it, is Game Change. And it's about the last presidential election, and I'm reading it because I never got a chance to read it. Probably the big downside of my job is I'm given so much must read. Every time I get on the plane when I go back and forth to DC and Illinois, it's here, read this material, here, edit these letters, here, give us an opinion on this op-ed. And so your brain gets tired when you have to do all that reading that I don't get a lot of pleasure reading. But Game Change is one that I actually wanted to read, so I'm almost done with it. I had an international flight that I was able to read for 10 hours straight, and Game Change. It's pretty fascinating.
How do you like to receive your news? Do you prefer the TV, internet?
So, if I can, I love holding the newspaper. I love being able to read through the newspaper. One of my big disappointments with all the changes in media is how a lot of our daily newspapers are starting to die out. I know in my hometown, the quality of the paper is getting a little less because there are fewer reporters or fewer people covering the local beats. And that's really why I like to read the local newspapers, find out what's going on. Now, one of my constituents turned me on to this Flipboard. Anybody got Flipboard on an iPad? Flipboard is a way where you can plug in different sites. You can plug in the New York Times, you can plug in the Wall Street Journal, you can plug in Politico, you can plug in all kinds of different feeds. And then Flipboard will give you the top stories from those feeds, or the news, and then it'll give you the top hits, so that the stories that more people are reading among all those sites. So it's a quick way for me to turn on my iPad, flip through and see kind of what's happening in the world. Because sometimes in a day like this, where I've got meetings, a whole day could go by and people could say, well, what do you think about Gaddafi being killed? What? So you kind of got to know if the media springs a question on you, what's going on. So Flipboard's my new source.
Do you have any political figure in United States history that you look up to?
You know, there are a lot of them that I look up to for different reasons. Probably the easiest one for me to answer is the guy who held this congressional seat, Abe Lincoln. I think it goes without saying he was a pretty effective leader and a pretty, somebody who had a pretty profound impact on our country. Now, obviously Ronald Reagan, you know, there's people that are, I mean, I have respect for a lot of Bill Clinton. There's certain things he did. I mean, I think The interesting thing about being a public official is that I look at other public officials, recognizing that there are no perfect people. And so sometimes we want to hold somebody up and say, oh, this is, who I aspire to be. Well, there's certain things I would aspire to be about that person, other things I wouldn't. So I think part of it is, with continual improvement in your own self, you look to what you'd like to emulate in other people. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily one person that is my go-to person.
Do you have any favorite sports?
So when I was in high school, I ran track. But now I exercise every day so that I can eat all my chicken dinners and everything I have to do. So I like to do all kinds of things. I love to snow ski in the winter, water ski in the summer. I swim laps 2 or 3 days a week, run, lift weights, all that stuff. So there's not one sport. It's harder to, I enjoy, football or a game of baseball, but I don't have the time to actively participate in a league or something.
Do you have any favorite entertainers? Especially when it comes to
Stephen Colbert, nobody saw that, did they? Stephen Colbert was Stephen Colbert was my most difficult interview I've ever had. Stephen Colbert asked for a 3-hour interview. We gave him 2 hours. He came in with a stack of information on me about that thick. He knew my dog, which had died 10 years ago's name. He knew my grade school teachers. He knew things about me that I know no one else in the media knows. And he would just fire these questions at me. And of course, he's got the camera rolling the whole time. And his goal is to get you off your game. His goal is to ask you a question to get you to say something stupid, so that then he's got it on tape, and he can edit it and make it look like it's kind of funny. So knowing that about Stephen Colbert, knowing all my other colleagues and Congress who've gone before him and made a fool out of themselves, I knew whatever you say, just don't take the bait. Don't say anything. So if you watch the interview of me, there's a lot of moments where I'm just sitting there like a deer in headlights, not responding. And it makes for a funny moment because he asks a question that's kind of funny and then I don't say anything. But it's because I didn't want to react to whatever it was he was saying because I knew where he was going to go with it. So, for example, he said to me, like half of the interview, so how are the prostitutes in D.C.? All he's wanting is for me to say the word prostitute, right? Whether I say, I don't know how the prostitute, whatever, or, because then he can use that to make whatever storyline he wants to do. So you just sit there and don't say anything. Because no matter how you answer that question, it ain't going to go anywhere. So I'm using this as an example because for 2 hours, and he's witty, he drilled me with questions like that, and I had to just bite my tongue. So all things considered, I thought the 5 minutes that everybody got to see was actually pretty good. And you have to know when you go before Stephen Colbert, you just got to be prepared to laugh at yourself. Because the whole thing is kind of comedic and meant to be. But he was my toughest interview that I've ever had. Not my favorite entertainer. I don't know. I'm a big music guy. I like going to concerts. So, and I like everything. So, last year I got to go to the American Music Awards, and the beauty of that is you get to see the best of every performer. And so there are people that I never would have bought a ticket for that I was like, wow. So I'm trying to think of who I like country music. Keith Urban, I think, gives an amazing concert. American Music Awards, I saw Lady Gaga. I never would have bought a ticket for a concert. She's an amazing performer. Piano starting on fire, she breaks out of the glass box, and it's like all kinds of stuff going on that, you're entertained. So I like different things. So music's good. My actors, James Bond, ready for the new Daniel Craig movie coming out. Anyone else? Any other favorites? All right. Well, listen, this has been fun. I hope you've learned a few things. I would ask you to consider this before you leave. Two things. One, part of my job, as you know, is to represent all of you. And perhaps not you, but your family or your parents. And I would just ask you to keep your eyes and ears open. If there's someone that you know that is having problems with the federal government, perhaps it's somebody who needs help with their passport, or somebody who's needing help with their adoption, or somebody who's needing help with their veterans benefits, anything, that you give them my name and number to contact. You can find me easily on the web. Go to my website, my email, my phone number's there. And that's my number one job, is to help people. So to the degree you know someone that needs help with federal agency or federal government, send them my way. And the second thing is an open invitation to any of you that can find your way out to Washington, D.C. One of the more fun things in the week is to actually see people from my district. And so if you're going to come out to D.C. or you can get out there with some friends or your family, call me a couple weeks, preferably a month before you're coming, and I can give you the best tour of the Capitol you've ever had, and even into the White House and the Supreme Court and some of the cool things. So that's another part of my job that's fun, and I would leave with that invitation. So thank you for being an awesome audience.
Two quick things. Number one, again, I want to thank you all. You guys are awesome. The way you listen and pay attention, that's exactly what we expect out of Glenwood kids. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Congressman Schock, for coming. And this is a very important day, it should be for you, to have the opportunity to hear someone like this speak. So thank you very much, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.